I'm Amber Mitchell, 34, and my life changed forever when I checked those lottery numbers. My hands trembled as I matched each digit, all six, perfectly aligned. $120 million. My name was now attached to a fortune I could barely comprehend. As the shock settled, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity: my family could never know, not after everything they'd done. I made my decision right there. I would claim this money anonymously and disappear. But money has a way of being found, especially by those who've made taking from you a lifelong habit. Before I dive into my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button, and like this video if you've ever fantasized about what you'd do with a massive lottery win. Trust me, what actually happens might surprise you just like it did me. To understand why I kept my lottery win secret, you need to understand my family. I grew up in a small town in Oregon where everyone knew everyone else's business. My parents' house was modest, a 3-bedroom ranch-style home that always seemed to need repairs that never got done. That's because my father, Henry, had other priorities for our money. Dad was what people politely call a gambling enthusiast. What they don't say is that he was an alcoholic who burned through our family savings chasing the next big win that never came. The irony that I was the one who eventually hit the jackpot isn't lost on me. Mom, Linda, wasn't much better. She enabled his behavior, always making excuses, always pretending things would get better after just one more game. Then there were my siblings. Rachel, my older sister by 8 years, learned early how to work the family dynamic. She was beautiful, charismatic, and completely self-centered. By the time she was 20, she had perfected the art of financial extraction. She'd call with tears about rent, car payments, or some emergency that always seemed to happen right around payday. "Amber, you know I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate," became her catchphrase. "I'll pay you back next month, I promise." Next month never came. Over the years, I calculated that I'd lent Rachel over $30,000 that was never repaid. When I finally started saying no, she'd turn nasty, accusing me of being selfish and uncaring about her 3 kids. The guilt trips were masterful. My brother Dustin was different but equally draining. 4 years older than me, he fancied himself an entrepreneur. Every few months, he'd have the next big thing that just needed some capital to get off the ground. There was the organic juice bar that failed after 3 months. The cryptocurrency investment scheme that mysteriously vanished with $15,000 of my savings. The food truck that never even got wheels. "This is it, Amber," he'd say, eyes gleaming with what I now recognize as delusion. "This time we're going to be rich. I just need a little help getting started." I believed him for too long. One particular incident stands out from when I was 22. I had saved $8,000 for a used car while working nights at a diner and days at a retail store. The day before I was going to buy it, Dustin called in a panic. His business partner had bailed, and he needed exactly that amount to secure a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. Mom and Dad joined the pressure campaign, telling me I could keep using the bus a little longer to help my brother. I gave in. The money disappeared into another failed venture, and Dustin stopped returning my calls for 3 months. I continued taking the bus for another year. When I was 25, I needed emergency dental surgery that cost $3,200. I didn't have dental insurance. I asked my parents if they could help the only time I'd ever asked them for money. Dad told me they were tapped out because they'd just lent Rachel $5,000 for a family vacation to Disney World. I ended up putting the procedure on a high-interest credit card that took me 2 years to pay off. The third and final straw came when I was 28. I had been saving for a down payment on a small condo. I had almost $20,000 set aside, the result of years of overtime and a Spartan lifestyle. My father called one night, sobbing. He had gotten in with some bad people over gambling debts. If he didn't pay $18,000 within the week, he claimed they'd hurt him or Mom. I emptied my savings account. 2 weeks later, I saw Facebook photos of my parents on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. When confronted, they claimed they needed the break after all that stress and had gotten a last-minute deal. I later discovered there had been no gambling debts at all. That was when I finally created distance. I moved 2 hours away, changed my phone number, and limited contact to obligatory holiday calls and occasional visits. I put myself through night school to become an accountant while working full-time. No one offered to help. No one even acknowledged the achievement when I graduated. By the time I won the lottery, I was living a quiet, independent life. My apartment was small but comfortable. I drove a 5-year-old Honda Civic. I had built a modest emergency fund and was contributing to my retirement account. I had friends who knew nothing about my toxic family dynamics. I had found peace in my carefully constructed boundaries. Then those 6 numbers changed everything. Winning $120 million isn't like in the movies. There's no oversized check presentation unless you want one, no immediate shower of cash. It's a process, a careful, methodical process that I was determined to navigate wisely. My first call wasn't to family or friends, it was to a law firm specializing in high net worth individuals. I found them after researching firms that had experience with lottery winners. During our first meeting, I made my priorities clear. I need to remain anonymous, I told the attorney, a serious woman named Patricia who didn't seem fazed by my request. Is that possible? In Oregon, lottery winners' names are public record, she explained, crushing my hopes momentarily. However, there are legal structures we can create that allow you to claim the prize through an entity rather than your personal name. We spent weeks setting up a blind trust. I became the beneficiary, not the public face. I named it New Beginnings Trust, a small, private joke about my fresh start. Patricia also connected me with a team of financial advisors, but I didn't immediately trust any of them. Trust issues run deep when you've been taken advantage of your entire life. I interviewed 7 different financial advisory firms, asking detailed questions about their investment philosophies, fee structures, and experience with sudden wealth management. I researched each advisor thoroughly, checking credentials and disciplinary records. I even hired a private investigator to do background checks on the final 3 candidates. Paranoid? Perhaps. But with $120 million at stake, I wasn't taking chances. I eventually selected a woman named Vivian who had 20 years of experience and specialized in first-generation wealth. Unlike other advisors who pushed aggressive investment strategies, Vivian advocated for a conservative approach. The goal isn't to triple your money, she told me. It's to make sure you never have to worry about money again. After taxes, I received a lump sum of approximately $68 million. Vivian helped me create a diversified portfolio, municipal bonds, low-cost index funds, some real estate investment trusts, and a small percentage in alternative investments. We established a structured draw that would give me an income well beyond what I needed while preserving and growing the principal. For 6 months after winning, I continued living exactly as I had before. I stayed in my apartment. I drove the same car. I kept my job, though I reduced to part-time, claiming I wanted to pursue some educational opportunities. No one suspected anything had changed. During those months, I meticulously planned my next steps. I researched properties in exclusive neighborhoods about 2 hours from my hometown, far enough to maintain distance from my family, but close enough to the city for convenience. I wanted privacy, security, and comfort without ostentation. After viewing dozens of properties, I found it, a 6,800 square foot home on 5 acres with a gate and security system. Built in the contemporary farmhouse style, it had a warmth that the more mansion-like properties lacked. The previous owner was a tech executive who had installed smart home features throughout. At $4.2 million, it was actually on the modest side for lottery winner housing, but it felt impossibly luxurious to me. The property had everything I wanted: a gourmet kitchen where I could finally pursue my passion for cooking, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves for my growing collection, an office overlooking a koi pond where I could work on writing projects I'd always deferred, and best of all, privacy. Mature trees surrounded the property, and the nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. As I signed the closing documents, a wave of excitement washed over me. This was the first truly visible indication of my new wealth. Until now, my fortune had been just numbers on statements and accounts. This house made it real. "Congratulations, Miss Mitchell," the real estate agent said, handing me the keys. "Welcome to your new home." I allowed myself a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. After years of sacrifice and struggle, I was giving myself permission to enjoy this one visible luxury. The rest of my wealth would remain invisible, invested wisely, used conservatively. If only I'd known how quickly my secret was about to unravel. Moving day arrived with perfect weather, sunny and mild. Professional movers handled my meager belongings from the apartment, which looked almost comical spread out in the vast spaces of my new home. I made a mental note to start furnishing the place properly, but I wanted to live in it first, to understand how I would use each space before filling it. For the first week, I lived in blissful isolation. I explored every corner of my new domain. I swam in the infinity pool overlooking the valley. I sipped coffee on the wraparound porch. I slept in the master suite with its ridiculous bathroom that was larger than my former living room. I felt like I was living someone else's life, but it was mine, all mine. Then came the post that changed everything. My neighborhood, despite its exclusivity and emphasis on privacy, had its share of busybodies. One neighbor in particular, a woman named Beatrice who lived down the road, apparently made it her mission to know everything about everyone. She maintained a neighborhood social media page, where she posted updates about new residents, community events, and local gossip. 2 weeks after I moved in, she drove slowly past my property, taking photos while trying to appear nonchalant. The next day, those photos appeared on her neighborhood page with the caption, "Mystery millionaire moves into the old Harrington property. Anyone know anything about A. Mitchell?" At first, I wasn't concerned. No one in my family's circle would see a post from an exclusive neighborhood group 2 hours away. But social media has a way of bridging impossible gaps. A former high school classmate who had married into money and now lived in the adjacent community saw the post. She recognized my name and shared it to her own page. "Is this the Amber Mitchell from Westridge High? Looks like someone's doing well for herself." From there, it was a digital wildfire. Within 3 days, the post had been shared across multiple community groups until it reached someone who was friends with my sister Rachel. That person sent her a direct message with a screenshot. "Isn't this your sister? Didn't know she was loaded." The first call came at 8:17 p.m. on a Thursday. I was in the kitchen trying a new recipe for coq au vin when my phone lit up with Rachel's name. I stared at it, puzzled. Rachel rarely called unless she needed something, and we hadn't spoken in over 3 months. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, she called again. Then again. Then she sent a text. "Amber! What the hell? When were you going to tell us you're living in a mansion? Call me back right now." My stomach dropped. I set down the wooden spoon I'd been holding and gripped the edge of the marble countertop for support. They knew. Somehow, they knew. Over the next hour, my phone exploded with notifications. Calls from Dustin, texts from my mother, voicemails from my father, even messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Each communication expressed some variation of shock, hurt, or indignation that I hadn't shared news of my apparent wealth with them. By midnight, I had 37 missed calls, 52 text messages, and 19 voicemails. I turned my phone off and poured myself a large glass of wine. So much for privacy. So much for peace. The siege had begun. I woke the next morning hoping it had all been a bad dream. It wasn't. When I turned my phone back on, the barrage continued. Now the messages had taken on a different tone, less shocked, more wounded, with an undercurrent of entitlement. "Family supports family, Amber. How could you forget where you came from?" texted my mother. "I always believed in you, sis." "Thought we were tight. Guess money changes people," wrote Dustin, conveniently forgetting the thousands he'd borrowed and never repaid. The most aggressive was Rachel. "You have some serious explaining to do. We're family. What's yours is ours. That's how it works." I spent the day ignoring messages and trying to figure out my next move. I hadn't even told them about the lottery win, they just knew about the house. Maybe I could claim it was an investment property, or that I had a wealthy partner, or that I was just the property manager. Around 4:30 p.m., the security system alerted me to a car at the gate. The camera showed Rachel's SUV idling outside, her face clearly visible through the windshield as she jabbed at the call button repeatedly. The intercom crackled to life. "Amber, I know you're in there. Open this gate right now. We need to talk." I hesitated, my finger hovering over the button that would deny her entry. But I knew Rachel. She wouldn't leave. She would make a scene. She might even call the police claiming she was worried about me. And once the police came, my name would be on official reports. The thread of my privacy would unravel even further. With a sigh of resignation, I pressed the button to open the gate. As I watched her car wind up the long driveway, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. Rachel stormed up to the front door before I could open it, pounding with both fists. When I finally swung it open, she pushed past me into the foyer, her eyes widening as she took in the soaring ceilings and elegant staircase. "Holy shit," she breathed, momentarily forgetting her anger in the face of such obvious luxury. Then she rounded on me, eyes narrowing. "What the hell, Amber? You hit the lottery or something? Married a rich guy you didn't tell us about?" "It's not what you think," I began weakly. "Then what is it?" "Because it looks like my little sister is secretly loaded and didn't bother telling her family who's struggled for years. It looks like you're living in a mansion while mom and dad can barely afford their medications. It looks like you've turned your back on the people who raised you." The guilt trip was starting already. Classic Rachel. And despite knowing better, despite all my therapy and boundary work, I felt the familiar twist of shame in my gut. "Come in," I said finally, closing the door behind her. "I'll explain everything." I had just allowed the first crack in the wall I'd built to protect myself and my new life. I didn't realize then that I'd just made the biggest mistake since winning the lottery. Rachel's demeanor changed instantly once I let her inside. Her anger seemed to evaporate as she wandered from room to room, exclaiming over every feature with exaggerated enthusiasm. "This kitchen is bigger than my whole first floor," she gushed, running her hand over the custom cabinetry. "And is that a wine cellar? Oh my God, Amber, this place is incredible." I followed behind her like an unwilling tour guide as she explored the house, increasingly uncomfortable with how she paused to take photos at every turn. She snapped pictures of the living room with its vaulted ceilings, the office with custom bookshelves, the theater room with plush recliners, the master bathroom with its steam shower and soaking tub. "Rachel, please stop taking pictures," I said as she posed for a selfie in my walk-in closet. "Oh, don't be such a killjoy, this is amazing. I can't believe my baby sister lives like this now." Her tone was light, but I detected an undercurrent of resentment. "Speaking of which, you still haven't explained how all this happened." I had prepared a vague explanation during the minutes before letting her in. "I've been investing for years," I told her, "and I got in early with a tech startup that was recently acquired. Plus, I've been saving everything I could." "Investing? You?" Rachel laughed as though I'd told an absurd joke. "Since when do you know anything about stocks? Come on, what's the real story?" "That is the real story," I insisted. "I've been studying financial management for years. It's literally my job." Rachel clearly didn't believe me, but she switched tactics. We moved to the kitchen where I reluctantly made coffee while she settled at the island countertop. Her expression shifted to one I recognized from childhood, the look she got right before asking for something. "So listen," she began, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I didn't want to mention this right away, but we've been having a really tough time lately." Here it comes, I thought. "Brandon and I have been talking about getting the kids into Lakeside Prep. You know public schools are just awful now, and they're so bright, especially Emma. She's practically a genius, according to her teachers. Lakeside Prep was the most expensive private school in their area, costing about $25,000 per year per child. With 3 children, that would be $75,000 annually. The thing is," Rachel continued, not waiting for my response, "the enrollment deadline for next year is coming up, and we need to put down deposits. It's just. With Brandon's company doing this restructuring, our finances are a bit tight right now." She looked up at me with wide, expectant eyes. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't for the kids' future. You know I'd do anything for them." The manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed. Less than an hour ago, she was pounding on my door demanding explanations. Now she wanted me to finance her children's private education. But something inside me, that same weakness that had allowed my family to take advantage of me for years, responded to her plea. Maybe this one gesture would satisfy her. Maybe if I helped just this once, with clear boundaries, she would respect my privacy moving forward. "How much do you need?" I asked, already knowing I would regret it. Rachel's face lit up. "The deposits are $10,000 per child, so $30,000 total. Plus, there's uniforms and supplies." She trailed off, clearly hoping I'd offer more. "I can help with the deposits," I said firmly, But that's it for now, I'm still getting settled here. 50,000 would really help us get them completely set up, Rachel countered quickly, sensing my weakness. You know, with everything they need to fit in properly. I hesitated, then nodded. Fine, 50,000, one time. Rachel squealed and came around the island to hug me tightly. You're the best sister ever. The kids will be so grateful. This is going to change their lives. I wrote her a check then and there, making her sign a simple receipt I drafted, acknowledging it was a gift, not a loan. Rachel signed it without even reading it, too excited by the money in her hands. She left an hour later, still taking photos on her way out, promising to keep in touch more often now. The relief I felt at her departure was overwhelming. For a few days, I thought perhaps it had worked. The calls and texts from other family members continued, but I ignored them. I changed my number, giving the new one only to my financial team and a few close friends. I believed I had contained the situation. Then, exactly 1 week after Rachel's visit, a friend sent me a screenshot that made my blood run cold. It was Rachel's Facebook page, set to public, with dozens of photos of my house. The caption read, "Visiting my millionaire sister's insane mansion. Guess who won the lottery and is sharing the love with family? So blessed to have a sister who takes care of us." The post had hundreds of comments and shares. In the comments, Rachel was answering questions about my wealth, making outrageous claims about the size of my lottery win, over 100 million after taxes, and telling people I was taking care of the whole family now. My privacy hadn't just been violated, it had been obliterated. My phone, which had been mercifully quiet with my number change, suddenly exploded with notifications as distant relatives, old classmates, and complete strangers found my social media accounts and bombarded me with messages. Everyone wanted to congratulate me. Everyone wanted to reconnect. Everyone, it seemed, needed just a small financial favor. I called Rachel immediately. "How could you?" I demanded when she answered. "I asked you not to take pictures. I asked for privacy." "Oh, calm down," she replied dismissively. "It's just Facebook, and why are you being so secretive anyway? It's weird. People are happy for you. You should be proud of your success. You told everyone I won the lottery." I was nearly shouting now. "You had no right." "Well, didn't you? I'm not stupid, Amber. No one makes enough from investments to buy a $5 million house overnight. Besides, what's the big deal? We're family. Family shares good fortune. Take the post down. Now." My voice was shaking with rage. "No," Rachel said flatly. "I'm not going to pretend my sister isn't wealthy just because she's turned into a snob. The kids are so excited about their new school, and everyone's been super supportive. Maybe if you weren't so selfish, you'd see this as a good thing." I hung up and immediately called my attorney. But the damage was done. My secret was out and the walls were closing in. The Saturday morning after Rachel's betrayal, I was awakened by the security system alerting me to multiple vehicles at my gate. The camera feed showed my parents' aging Buick and Dustin's pickup truck idling outside. My father was leaning on the call button, his expression impatient. I briefly considered pretending I wasn't home, but the cars parked in my driveway would give me away. With a sense of impending doom, I pressed the intercom. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "There's my lottery winner!" My father's voice crackled through the speaker, artificially jovial. "Open up, sweetheart. We've come to see your new place." I could have refused. I should have refused. But 3 decades of conditioning don't disappear overnight, even with 100 million reasons to change. I buzzed them in, then rushed to throw on decent clothes and brace myself for the invasion. They arrived at my door with broad smiles that didn't reach their eyes. My mother clutched a supermarket cake with "Congratulations" spelled out in garish blue icing. Dustin carried a cheap bottle of champagne. My father spread his arms wide as if expecting a hug I had no interest in giving. "There she is, the family millionaire," he boomed, stepping forward to embrace me whether I wanted it or not. He smelled of the same aftershave he'd worn my entire life, mixed with the faint scent of whiskey. It was barely 10 a.m. "We came as soon as we heard the news," my mother said, pushing past me into the foyer. She paused, taking in the crystal chandelier and marble flooring. "My goodness, Amber. This is certainly something." Dustin whistled as he wandered into the great room. "Holy shit, sis. You've been holding out on us." What followed was an excruciating tour of my home, with each family member making mental calculations of the value of everything they saw. My father lingered in the wine cellar, commenting on specific bottles with sudden expertise. My mother measured the kitchen with her steps, murmuring about how she'd always wanted an island that big. Dustin disappeared for 20 minutes and returned having somehow located my home theater, where he'd already made himself comfortable testing the surround sound system. By noon, they had explored every corner of my home without invitation or permission. I suggested lunch, hoping to contain them in one area. I ordered delivery from a local restaurant, unwilling to cook for this ambush visit. As we sat around the dining table waiting for the food, the real agenda emerged. "So," my father began, leaning back in his chair with calculated casualness, 120 million, huh? That's quite a windfall, baby girl. I didn't say that, I replied carefully. And I'd appreciate if we didn't discuss specific numbers. Don't be so secretive, my mother chided. We're family. There shouldn't be secrets among family. Rachel mentioned you took the lump sum, Dustin chimed in. Smart move, that's what I would have done. Better to control your own investments, right? I hadn't told Rachel anything about lump sum versus annuity payments. She completely fabricated details to make her story more impressive. Speaking of investments, my father continued, leaning forward eagerly, I've been thinking. You know, I've always had a good head for money management. I nearly choked on my water, this from the man who had gambled away our house payment money more times than I could count. And I'd be happy to help you set up a proper investment strategy. No offense, but you've never had to handle this kind of money before. It's easy for these financial advisor types to take advantage of someone inexperienced. The irony was breathtaking. Thank you, I said stiffly, but I have a team of professionals managing things. Those people charge outrageous fees, he dismissed with a wave. Family does it for love. What's your monthly allowance? Dustin asked bluntly. You should be drawing at least 500 grand a year for personal expenses, minimum. Before I could respond to this invasive question, the doorbell rang, announcing our lunch delivery. I excused myself, grateful for the interruption. When I returned with the bags of food, I found my mother on her phone, giving someone a virtual tour of my dining room. Yes, it's all real, she was saying. Wait till you see the pool area. We're staying for the weekend, so I'll send more pictures tomorrow. Who are you talking to? I demanded. Just Aunt Judith, my mother replied, unembarrassed. She sends her congratulations, by the way. Lunch was a minefield of inappropriate questions and thinly veiled requests. My father mentioned that their roof was leaking and would cost $30,000 to replace properly. Dustin described a revolutionary new business idea involving cryptocurrency and sustainable farming that needed about $2 million in startup capital. My mother lamented how their retirement fund had been decimated by the economy and how they were just scraping by. By mid-afternoon, I had a pounding headache. When my father announced they'd brought overnight bags and would be staying just for the weekend, I nearly lost my composure. You can't stay here, I said, finally finding some backbone. I have plans. What plans? My mother asked suspiciously. Personal plans, I replied, unwilling to elaborate on the lie. Well, cancel them, my father said dismissively. Family comes first. Besides, we drove all this way. 2 hours is not all this way, I countered. But they were already discussing which guest rooms they wanted. My mother had decided the blue room had the best morning light, while Dustin had claimed the guest suite nearest the theater room. My protests were ignored completely. I retreated to my office, locking the door behind me. Through the window, I watched in disbelief as Dustin and my father unloaded suitcases from their cars. This wasn't a visit, it was an occupation. That evening, I found them giving a tour of my home to people I didn't recognize, friends they'd invited over without asking me. They had accessed my wine cellar and were serving my most expensive bottles. My mother was showing off the kitchen as if she had designed it herself. My father was holding court in the library, regaling his guests with fabricated stories about how he had always encouraged Amber's financial acumen. From the doorway, I overheard him say to his friend, "Of course she's taking care of us now, setting up trust funds for everyone in the family. It's what any grateful daughter would do." When the uninvited guests finally left, I confronted my family in the kitchen. "This is unacceptable," I told them. "You can't just move in and take over my home." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother replied, loading my dishwasher incorrectly. We're just visiting. Yeah. Lighten up, sis, Dustin added, opening another bottle of wine. We're celebrating your good fortune. Our good fortune. Really. What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? My father put his arm around my shoulders, squeezing too tightly. When one family member succeeds, we all succeed. That's how family works. As they continued making themselves at home, I retreated once more to my locked office. Through the wall, I heard my father on the phone, his voice carrying clearly, "Yeah, we're at Amber's mansion now. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Don't worry, we've got our meal tickets secured. By the time we're done, she'll be setting us all up for life." I sat in the dark, listening to them plan their future with my money, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 2 weeks after my family's initial invasion, I was living in a nightmare of my own creation. Despite my insistence that their weekend visit end, my parents had simply refused to leave. They'd moved into the guest house and filled it with their belongings, claiming the change of environment was helping their health issues. Dustin hadn't physically moved in, but he might as well have. He appeared daily with different business associates, shifty-looking men with firm handshakes and evasive eyes who examined my property like they were casing it for a robbery. They held meetings in my dining room, spreading papers across the table and speaking in hushed tones that fell silent whenever I entered. And then there was Rachel. After her social media betrayal, she had doubled down rather than apologized. Now she called daily with escalating demands, each one presented as an urgent crisis that only I could solve. "Brandon has been having chest pains," she told me on a Tuesday morning call. "The doctor says he needs specialized tests and treatment. It's going to cost around $200,000, and our insurance won't cover experimental procedures." "What exactly is wrong with him?" I asked, immediately suspicious. "It's complicated. Something with his heart valves. I don't understand all the medical terminology." Her voice became tearful. "Please, Amber, I'm scared. The kids need their father." I told her I'd think about it, then called Brandon's workplace directly, claiming to be confirming an appointment. The receptionist cheerfully informed me that Brandon was at his desk and had just returned from a 2-week vacation, looking tanned and healthy as ever. When I confronted Rachel with this information, she became indignant. "I never said he was hospitalized yet. The condition could become serious if untreated. You're playing with his life because you've become so selfish with your money." The attacks came from all directions now. Dustin began bringing his potential investors to my home without warning, once even using the pool area for a meeting while I was out grocery shopping. "These guys are serious players," he insisted when I objected. "They're willing to put in $20 million if I can match it with 15. It's the opportunity of a lifetime." When I researched these serious players, I discovered 2 had been involved in investment fraud cases, and 1 didn't seem to exist at all beyond a hastily created LinkedIn profile. Meanwhile, my parents had begun telling neighbors they were co-owners of the property. "We're helping our daughter manage her new estate," my mother told the landscaping crew. "Feel free to check with us on any decisions." They had started rearranging furniture, replacing artwork with their own tacky prints, and even interviewing housekeepers without consulting me. When I objected, they acted wounded. "We're just trying to help," my father said, looking hurt. "You're so busy with your whatever it is you do all day." What I was doing was fending off the avalanche of requests that had started arriving from extended family. Cousin Jeff needed $50,000 to pay off gambling debts. Aunt Carol wanted seed money for her multi-level marketing skincare business. Uncle Paul thought I should fund his daughter's destination wedding in Bali. Every request came with the same emotional leverage, family obligation, the implication that denying them proved I had changed and forgotten where I came from. The breaking point came when I discovered my parents had given a house tour to a group of their friends, charging $20 per person for the privilege of seeing how the 1% lives. I was sitting in my office that day, on a call with Vivian discussing strategies for protecting my assets, when I heard unfamiliar voices and laughter coming from the main floor. When I investigated, I found 12 strangers wandering through my home, taking photos and touching my belongings while my mother played tour guide. "And this artwork was commissioned specifically for Amber by a famous European artist," she was saying, gesturing to a print I'd bought at a local gallery for $200. "Mom," I hissed, pulling her aside. What is happening right now? Just showing some friends from church your beautiful home, she replied innocently. They've been dying to see it. Did you charge them admission? I demanded, having seen cash changing hands earlier. Don't be ridiculous. They just made donations to our church roof fund. She patted my cheek condescendingly. Don't worry about it. Later that evening, after the uninvited guests had finally left, I overheard Dustin and my father in the kitchen. She's still got those financial advisors blocking access, my father was saying in a low voice. We need to find her account information. I tried looking through her office last week, but everything's locked up, Dustin replied. She must have paperwork somewhere with account numbers, passwords. Keep searching when she's out. There's got to be a way to access those funds directly. The allowance she's giving us is a joke compared to what she's sitting on. I stood frozen in the hallway, my blood running cold. The allowance they referred to was the $3,000 per week. I had reluctantly agreed to provide for household expenses money that kept disappearing without any apparent impact on our food or supply situation. I backed away silently and returned to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. That night, I lay awake planning my next move, finally understanding that gentle approaches would not work with people who viewed my boundaries as mere obstacles to overcome. The next morning, I left early, telling my parents I had meetings in the city. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop and called Patricia, my attorney. My family is out of control, I told her. I need options. How bad is it? She asked. They've moved in without permission. They're going through my personal papers, looking for financial information. They're bringing strangers into my home, and they're telling everyone they're co-owners of my property. There was a pause. Amber, that's not just inappropriate. Some of what you're describing may be criminal. Have you confronted them directly? Confrontation doesn't work with them, I explained. They ignore boundaries completely. Then we need to take more formal steps, she said firmly. I'll draw up eviction papers immediately. In the meantime, secure your important documents and consider changing your security codes and locks. As I ended the call, I felt simultaneously terrified and relieved. Standing up to my family went against decades of conditioning, but I finally understood I had no choice. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about my right to live my own life. I spent the day consulting with security specialists, financial advisors, and lawyers, building a team to help me reclaim my home and my peace. When I returned that evening, I found my house in chaos. My parents and Dustin were hosting what appeared to be a family reunion in my backyard. At least 30 people, cousins, aunts, uncles, and people I barely recognized were swimming in my pool, using my outdoor kitchen, and making themselves at home throughout my property. Music blared from my sound system. Someone had accessed my wine cellar again and was serving my most expensive bottles. As I stood there in shock, my cousin Megan approached, martini in hand. Amber! There you are. Your mom said you were cool with us using the pool anytime. This place is amazing. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. So listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about a small business loan. I walked away without answering, heading straight for my father who stood at the grill, playing host with my food in my home. This ends now, I told him, keeping my voice low. Everyone needs to leave, immediately. He laughed, flipping a burger. Don't be ridiculous. These people came all this way to congratulate you. No, they came to see what they could get from me, and you invited them without asking. In my house. Our house, he corrected, his smile fading. Family property is family property. You think you'd have any of this if we hadn't raised you? You owe us. In that moment, something in me finally broke, or perhaps it was something finally healing. The spell of familial obligation that had bound me for so long shattered completely. I owe you nothing, I said clearly. And you have 30 minutes to get everyone off my property before I call the police and report you all for trespassing. His face darkened. You wouldn't dare. I pulled out my phone and began dialing. Try me. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps he was. The morning after I had shut down the impromptu family reunion, I sat across from Patricia in her downtown office. The sleek, minimalist space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city felt like a fortress, clean, orderly, and secure, everything my home no longer was. Based on what you've told me, Patricia said, reviewing her notes. We have several legal options. Your family members are clearly uninvited guests who have overstayed their welcome. Under Oregon law, they have not established tenancy since they've been there less than 30 days, so we don't need to go through formal eviction proceedings yet. Yet? I asked, alarmed at the implication. If they refuse to leave and claim residential rights, things could get complicated. That's why we need to act quickly. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Are you prepared for this to get ugly? Because it will. I took a deep breath. I don't want it to be ugly, but I need my life back. Then here's what we do. She outlined a plan that started with formal written notices, demanding they vacate the property within 72 hours, followed by legal action if they refused. In the meantime, she added, secure your valuables and important documents, change your security codes, and document everything. Take photos of your property now, in case they damage anything during this process. I left her office with a stack of legal papers and a knot in my stomach. I had never directly confronted my family this way before. The thought made me physically ill, but I reminded myself that I had tried being reasonable. I had tried generosity, neither had worked. When I arrived home, my parents were in the kitchen making lunch as if nothing had happened the previous night. Dustin was nowhere to be seen, but his laptop and papers were spread across the dining table, indicating he was coming back. There she is, my father said cheerfully. We were just talking about the landscaping. The south lawn would be perfect for a pudding green, don't you think? I set my purse down carefully. We need to talk. Of course, honey, my mother said, not looking up from the sandwich she was making. Right after lunch. Now, I insisted. This is important. Something in my tone made them both pause. My father's easy smile faltered. My mother finally looked at me, her expression wary. I need you to leave, I said simply. All of you. Today. A beat of silence followed this declaration. Then my father laughed, though it didn't reach his eyes. Very funny, Amber. Is this about last night? Look, we got carried away with the party, I admit it, but this isn't about the party, I interrupted, though that's part of it. This is about boundaries. This is about respect. You moved in without permission. You're using my home and my belongings as if they belong to you. You're inviting strangers over. You're going through my private papers. It needs to stop. My mother's face had turned stony. So that's how it is. You get a little money and suddenly your family isn't good enough for you anymore. This isn't about money, I tried to explain. It's about behavior. If you had asked to visit, if you had respected my privacy and my property, things could have been different. We're your parents, my father said, his voice hardening. We don't need permission to be in our daughter's home. That's not how family works. It's exactly how family should work, I countered. Respect goes both ways. This is because of those fancy lawyers and financial people, isn't it? My mother accused. They've turned you against your own blood, convinced you to keep everything for yourself. I slid the formal notice across the counter. I'm asking you nicely to leave today. If you don't, this document gives you 72 hours to vacate before I take legal action. My father picked up the paper, scanned it, then tore it in half. You're not evicting us, he said flatly. We have rights. We've been living here. We've established residence. He was parroting legal terminology someone had clearly been advising him on tenant rights. It's been less than 30 days, I replied evenly. You're not tenants. You're guests who've overstayed their welcome. We'll see what the courts say about that, he shot back. You think judges look kindly on wealthy people throwing their elderly parents out on the street? Think of the headlines. Lottery winner evicts own family. Your reputation will be ruined. The threat was clear. Leave us alone, or we'll make this public and messy. I have copies of that notice, I told them, gesturing to the torn paper. And documentation of everything that's happened since you arrived. Including recordings of conversations where Dad talked about accessing my accounts without permission. This was a bluff. I didn't have recordings, but my father's momentary flicker of uncertainty told me I'd hit a nerve. You wouldn't do that to us, my mother said, but she sounded less certain. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked, genuinely curious about their perception. When have you ever put my needs before your own? The question hung in the air, unanswered. My father's face reddened. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. And this is how you repay us? By threatening us with lawyers? I'm giving you a choice, I said calmly. Leave willingly today. and we can work on rebuilding our relationship from an appropriate distance. Stay against my wishes, and we'll have no relationship at all once this is over." For a moment, I thought I might have gotten through to them. My mother's expression softened slightly, but then Dustin burst in through the back door, his face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe who I just met with," he announced, oblivious to the tension in the room. "These guys are blockchain pioneers. They're willing to partner with us on the agricultural cryptocurrency platform. They just need an initial investment of—" He stopped, finally registering our expressions. "What's going on?" My father quickly filled him in, portraying me as an ungrateful daughter corrupted by wealth and outside influences. With each word, I saw Dustin's expression harden. "So that's it?" he finally said. "You hit the jackpot and now you're done with us?" Classic Amber, always thinking you're better than the rest of us. "That's not what this is about," I tried again. "Save it," he snapped. "You've made your position clear, but guess what? We're not going anywhere. We've been staying here long enough to establish tenancy rights. You want us out? Take us to court. Let's see how that plays out in public." "1 week," I said, feeling my resolve weaken under their united front. "You can stay 1 more week to make arrangements. After that, I'm changing the locks and security codes." It was a retreat, a compromise I would regret. But facing all 3 of them, their familiar patterns of guilt and manipulation working in perfect concert, I felt my determination waver. 2 weeks, my father countered immediately, sensing weakness. "And you set us up with enough money to get re-established. We're thinking $1 million each would be fair, considering the circumstances." I stared at him in disbelief. Even now, facing eviction, they were trying to extort money from me. 1 week, I repeated firmly, "and not $1 more than what I've already given you." I turned and walked out, ignoring their protests behind me. In my car, hands shaking, I called Patricia to update her on the confrontation. "They're threatening to make this public and messy," I told her. "That's a common tactic," she replied calmly. "But remember, Amber, you have all the power here, not them. They're just used to you giving it away." As I hung up, I realized she was right. All my life, I had given my power away to these people. Now it was time to reclaim it, whatever the cost. But that night, lying alone in my bedroom with the door locked, I could hear them in the kitchen below, talking and laughing as if our confrontation had never happened. I realized with a sinking feeling that they had no intention of leaving in a week. They didn't believe I would actually enforce my boundaries. And the worst part was, a small voice inside me wondered if they might be right. 6 days after our confrontation, with less than 24 hours remaining in the 1-week deadline, I received an urgent call from Vivian, my financial advisor. "Amber, are you trying to transfer $1.2 million out of your main investment account?" she asked without preamble. "What? No." I sat up straight in my office chair, my heart racing. "I haven't authorized any transfers." "That's what I thought," Vivian said grimly. "Our fraud department flagged an attempt this morning. Someone accessed your account online and initiated a transfer to an external bank. They had your account number, password, and answers to your security questions." The room seemed to tilt around me. "How is that possible?" "The IP address was traced to your home network," she continued. "Amber, someone in your house is trying to steal from you." I felt sick. This wasn't just boundary crossing or emotional manipulation anymore. This was theft a crime. "I've already put a freeze on all your accounts," Vivian assured me, "and we're changing all security protocols immediately. But you need to find out who did this and how they got your information." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this escalation. Despite everything, I had never imagined my family would go this far. Taking advantage of my generosity was one thing. Active fraud was another entirely. I needed evidence. If I was going to finally end this situation, I needed irrefutable proof of what they were doing. The security system in my home included cameras in the common areas, but not in private spaces like bedrooms or my office. However, after our confrontation, I had installed a hidden camera in my office as an extra precaution. I accessed the security footage from my laptop, scrolling back through the previous day. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, at 3:17 p.m. while I was out grocery shopping, the office door opened. My father and Dustin entered cautiously, looking over their shoulders. Hurry up, my father whispered on the footage. She'll be back soon. I watched in disbelief as they methodically went through my desk drawers, photographed documents with their phones, and tried various combinations on my filing cabinet locks. When those efforts failed, Dustin produced what looked like lock-picking tools and worked on the cabinet until it opened. Jackpot, he murmured, pulling out folders containing my financial statements. For the next 20 minutes, they photographed every page of my private financial documents, including account numbers, passwords I had written down, and contact information for my entire financial team. With these accounts, my father said, leafing through a statement, we could set everyone up for life. Rachel's kids' college, Mom's medical bills, my retirement, and my business, Dustin added. Once we have access, we should move quickly before she realizes. My father nodded. Start with smaller amounts. Don't get greedy too fast. A few $100,000 here and there won't trigger alarms. Except it had. They had gotten greedy immediately, trying to transfer over $1 million at once. I continued watching the footage, my shock giving way to cold anger. After photographing all my financial documents, they replaced everything carefully, making sure to leave the office exactly as they had found it. Before leaving, my father paused at the door. Remember, not a word to Amber. As far as she knows, we're planning to leave as agreed. Once we have the money secured, it won't matter what she does. I stopped the video, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a carefully planned heist. My own family had conspired to rob me. I called Patricia immediately. I need you to come to my house, now, and bring a security team if you can. While waiting, I gathered every bit of evidence I could find. I downloaded and backed up the security footage to multiple locations. I took screenshots of the fraud alert from my bank. I compiled a list of every boundary violation, every unauthorized entry, every attempt to access my finances. Then I confronted them. I found all three of them in the kitchen, making dinner as if nothing had happened. As if they hadn't just attempted to steal over $1 million from me. The bank called me today, I said, standing in the doorway, my voice eerily calm. Someone tried to transfer $1.2 million out of my account without authorization. My mother continued chopping vegetables, not looking up. That's terrible, honey. Identity theft is so common these days. It wasn't identity theft, I replied. The transfer was initiated from this house. From my IP address. A beat of silence. My father cleared his throat. Well, that's strange. Maybe you have a hacker on your Wi-Fi network? I have security camera footage of you and Dustin breaking into my office yesterday, I said flatly. I have you on video stealing my financial information and planning how to gradually drain my accounts. The knife in my mother's hand clattered to the countertop. Dustin froze, his glass of wine halfway to his lips. My father's face drained of color. You're recording us? My father finally managed, his outrage transparently manufactured. In your own home? That's an invasion of privacy. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. No, breaking into my office and stealing my financial information is an invasion of privacy. What you did is also a federal crime. Now, Amber, my mother began, adopting the soothing tone she'd always used to diffuse situations. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Your father and Dustin would never— Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I have it all on video. Every word, every action. The bank has already filed a fraud report with the authorities. This last part was a slight exaggeration. The bank had offered to file a report, but I had asked them to wait. I still had a shred of hope that this could be resolved without involving law enforcement. Dustin broke first. It was Dad's idea, he blurted, ignoring my father's warning glare. He said you owed us after all these years. He said it was just taking what should have been ours anyway. Shut up, you idiot, my father hissed. No, you shut up, Dustin shouted back. I'm not going to jail because of your schemes. I told you to start small, but you got greedy. Their unified front collapsed as they turned on each other, each trying to minimize their own culpability while maximizing the others. My mother retreated to the familiar role of peacemaker, though her eyes darted nervously to the doorway as if calculating escape routes. I recorded every word of their mutual recriminations on my phone. When they finally ran out of accusations, a heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Here's what happens now, I said quietly. You have 2 hours to pack your things and leave my property. permanently. If you're not gone by then, the security team that's on their way will remove you, and the police will be called. You wouldn't call the cops on your own family, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. After what you just tried to do? In a heartbeat. I met each of their eyes in turn. 2 hours, not a minute more. And if we refuse? My father challenged, though his bluster had diminished considerably. Then you'll be arrested for attempted fraud, breaking and entering, and theft. The security footage will be turned over to the police, along with the bank's fraud report. I imagine it will make quite a story for the local news. Family tries to steal lottery winner's fortune. Is that the publicity you want? For once, they had no counter-argument, no manipulation tactics left to deploy. The evidence was too overwhelming, the consequences too severe to ignore. What about our things at the guest house? My mother asked in a small voice. Pack what you can in 2 hours. The rest will be shipped to whatever address you provide. And before you get any ideas about taking anything that isn't yours, I added, seeing the calculation in my father's eyes, every room is being recorded, and I have a complete inventory of my possessions. This, too, was a bluff but a necessary one. I wouldn't put it past them to steal valuables on their way out. As they shuffled off to pack, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a profound sadness and exhaustion. These people shared my blood, but they had never truly been my family in the ways that mattered. While they packed, I sat in my office making calls. I contacted my entire financial team, instructing them to change every password, security question, account number, and access protocol. I hired a residential security company to arrive immediately and begin upgrading my home's protection systems. I arranged for all my locks to be changed that very day. Patricia arrived with 2 security professionals who positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the house. Their presence alone sent a clear message. This was no longer a family disagreement, but a serious security situation. You're doing the right thing, Patricia assured me, reviewing the evidence I had gathered. What they attempted was criminal. You're being more merciful than most would in your position. 2 hours later, almost to the minute, my family departed. They left without goodbyes, without apologies, without acknowledgement of what they had done. My mother cried silent tears as she walked to the car, but I recognized them as tears of self-pity rather than remorse. My father kept his face stony, his back rigid with injured pride. Dustin couldn't meet my eyes at all. As their cars disappeared down my driveway, I felt the strange lightness that comes with cutting toxic ties, grief and relief in equal measure. Change the security codes, I told the security team. All of them. Now. My war for independence had been costly, but I had finally won. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I stood at my front gate watching as a police officer served my family with formal no trespassing orders and cease and desist letters. After consulting with Patricia, I had decided against pressing criminal charges for the attempted fraud, not out of misplaced loyalty, but because I wanted this chapter of my life closed quickly and completely. The civil actions and restraining orders would accomplish that without the prolonged drama of a criminal case. My family's reactions were exactly as I had expected. My mother wept dramatically, playing the role of the heartbroken parent for the officer's benefit. My father blustered about ungrateful children and family rights. Dustin stood sullenly in the background, avoiding eye contact. Rachel, who hadn't been involved in the fraud attempt but had continued posting about my wealth on social media despite multiple requests to stop, received her own cease and desist letter. Her response was a flurry of angry texts calling me selfish, cold-hearted, and dead to the family. I blocked her number after the 30th message. With the legal formalities completed, I turned my attention to rebuilding my sanctuary. The security upgrades were extensive. New state-of-the-art locks on all doors and windows, an advanced alarm system with motion sensors, cameras covering every approach to the property, and a panic button system connected directly to a private security firm. I hired new staff, a property manager, a housekeeper, and a part-time groundskeeper, all vetted thoroughly by a professional agency. Each signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements and understood the importance of maintaining my privacy. But physical security was only part of the solution. The deeper work happened in the quiet office of Dr. Eleanor Bennett, a therapist specializing in family trauma and financial transitions. What you're experiencing is common among sudden wealth recipients, she explained during one of our sessions. The money itself isn't the problem, it's how it disrupts existing relationship patterns and brings underlying issues to the surface. I always knew my family was dysfunctional, I admitted, but I never imagined they would go this far. Money is just a magnifier, Dr. Bennett said. It doesn't change people, it amplifies who they already are. Generous people become more generous. Entitled people become more entitled. Manipulative people find new ways to manipulate. Over weeks of therapy, I explored the deep-seated guilt and obligation that had allowed my family to take advantage of me for so long. I unpacked childhood patterns, examined my need for approval, and gradually began to understand that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for healthy relationships. The guilt you feel isn't rational, Dr. Bennett told me. It's programmed. You were taught from childhood that your needs matter less than everyone else's. That's not true, and it never was. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my sense of self apart from my role as the family fixer, the reliable one who could always be counted on to sacrifice for others. I began to recognize that my worth wasn't tied to what I could provide, but to who I was as a person. As the emotional work progressed, I also tackled the practical aspects of my new life. With Vivian's guidance, I established a small, carefully managed charitable foundation focused on financial literacy and support for first-generation college students. This allowed me to give back in meaningful ways without making myself vulnerable to exploitation. Your generosity should be on your terms, Vivian advised. Structured, intentional, and aligned with your values, not extracted through guilt or manipulation. 6 months after the confrontation, my life had found a new rhythm. My home was peaceful again, a true sanctuary rather than a battleground. The foundation was funding scholarships for deserving students. My investments were thriving under careful management. I had even begun writing a book about financial psychology and family dynamics, hoping my experience might help others navigate similar challenges. More importantly, I had begun building authentic connections. I joined a book club where no one knew about my wealth. I volunteered at a local literacy program where I was valued for my time and skills, not my money. I cultivated friendships based on mutual interests and genuine affection rather than financial potential. One evening, as I sat on my patio watching the sunset over the valley, my phone buzzed with a notification. Rachel had tagged me in another social media post, this one claiming I had abandoned the family and was living in isolated luxury while refusing to help loved ones in need. A year earlier, such an attack would have sent me spiraling into guilt and self-doubt. Now, I simply took a screenshot for my attorney, blocked Rachel on that platform as well, and returned to enjoying the sunset. The lottery had given me financial freedom, but the real prize had been finding the courage to free myself from toxic relationships and unreasonable expectations. I had learned that family isn't just about shared DNA, it's about mutual respect, support, and love that doesn't come with price tags or conditions. As I sipped my tea and watched the sky turn from orange to purple, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been painful, but necessary. I had lost the family I was born into, but gained something more valuable. The freedom to create a life on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. The money hadn't changed me, it had revealed me. And finally, at 35, I liked the person I saw in the mirror, strong, compassionate, and wise enough to know the difference between generosity and exploitation, between guilt and love. What would you do if you won the lottery tomorrow? Would you tell your family immediately, or keep it secret like I did? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story about setting boundaries and standing up for yourself, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no to the people you love when they're asking for the wrong things. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to build the life you deserve, with or without a lottery ticket.